Bichara Supply Chain, highlighting and showcasing solutions for the most complex challenges facing the industry in 21st century by our team of subject matter experts and mentors. Broadcasting every week, all year round, we will present the most up-to-date series of podcasts and webinars.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bichara Supply Chain. This is Farhadi, your host, and we have now very special guest, Adebayo. He is a managing partner at the Pantote Solutions, also a principal partner and senior supply chain consultant for Epot Consulting, and he is also lecturer in supply chain management at the Sam Houston State University. So thanks for coming and welcome to Bichara Supply Chain, Adebayo.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate the honor and the privilege to be on this podcast.
That's great. So today's topic is dynamic leadership in the supply chains. But before that, can you please brief a bit about yourself, your professional background, and how do you end up with the current role in the supply chain?
So I started my journey in supply chain in 1998. When I enlisted into the United States Army. I spent 20 years in the Army before I retired, and I started my own consulting company. So prior to that, I did not have any, I have a kind of a vague knowledge of what logistics and supply chain is all about, but I wasn't that quite in tune with it until I joined the military, whereby I got exposed into the world of supply chain and why it is a lifeline on every business operation, not only in the military, but every business operation out there. So I started from a part receiving, driving forklift in the warehouse to actually doing demand analysis and working with maintenance. I started my career in receiving parts, ordering parts, and anticipating demand for the maintenance of fleet of vehicles. Then I progress into warehouse, then I progress into leading, and then interwoven with a lot of leadership roles, and then straight into working as a warehouse manager, and from there I progress until both at the tactical and organizational level, and operational level, and at strategic level as well. I've held different positions in all those levels of leadership in supply chain. Then I retired, and I started my own consulting company. So that's my supply chain journey in a snapshot. It's pretty much brief, but quite packed with all kind of events that kind of shape the way I view supply chain.
Yeah, awesome. So leadership is playing a critical role in the supply chain management, especially in order to address the demands of the global economy. So what is your view on this, Adebayo?
So as I said, there are two things I learned, two takeaways from the military is the leadership and the supply chain that I got from it. And I can tell you, leadership is an integral part of the way supply chain is being handled globally. Actually, you cannot effectively and efficiently execute your supply chain and supply chain kind of strategy in today's world if you do not have leadership kind of overseeing it. If you don't have a leadership laced in it. Actually, most of these things, especially when we kind of do operations in a global landscape, cannot be done without having effective leadership. Leadership is the central point of ability of supply chain to be effective. So if you really look into the core operations of most of the supply chains that you see, be it a small business or to medium-sized business, and also to the large-sized business, leadership has always been at the helm of it all. So you cannot actually, like I said, you cannot effectively display your supply chain. Your supply chain cannot be functioning well without the help of leadership. So leadership is always at the central point. And that's why it's quite funny that when as you develop your skill set as you climb up the ladder in supply chain, so you improve your leadership as well. And I can also go on a limb and say that most supply chain managers, they're better leaders because they are confronted with a lot of scenarios, a lot of situations on a daily basis that kind of sharpen and helps them in developing their leadership skills in a rapid pace, more than their counterpart in other business, more than their other counterparts in other business functions in an organization. So it is important to understand that the role of supply chain helps develop leaders within the organization, and because of the situation you face on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Another thing I would like to ask is about the dynamic leaderships. It's maybe what the supply chain function needs to close the skills gap and retain the strategic challenge. So can you please tell us a bit about this dynamic leadership and how has the organization has to put this dynamic leadership into the practice?
So dynamic leadership is just like any other form of leadership out there.
Mm-hmm.
Has to do with making sure that whatever you have going on, organization, there's a direction of the organization and the communication strategy, and then kind of in sync, with everything you're doing. It's it's a mixture of everything that is going on within the organization.
Mm-hmm.
We have different kind of, transformational, transactional, and all those things. But dynamic leadership kind of merge everything together. It's an effective leadership characteristics that is not being actually shine light on. So it is important, as you said, for us to be, usually for supply chain managers rather, to be effective, they have to, there are different kind of characteristics, communication is actually the key point when you're talking about dynamic leadership. And why is this quite important? As a supply chain managers, ability to communicate effectively both upstream and downstream of your chain is quite important. And for you to be able to lead, and I think your question is in adopting, leadership, dynamic leadership behaviors maybe what supply chain function needs to close the skill gap, right? Okay. So closing the skill gap, one of the biggest things I would say in dynamic leadership is communication, because it is what is needed for dynamic leadership to be kind of have this prowess over other style of leadership. It is the ability to communicate effectively. And for supply chain managers, it is, how can I put it? There's a way I'm thinking about how this thing can actually function in a way that it's the skills that is needed in today's world. Communication is one of them at the center point of it. So for you to be able to close the leadership, all this skills gap, dynamic leadership helps you forge your communication. Let me put it this way. Okay. Dynamic leadership helps you forge your communication skills, which in turn help you to close down all the other skills that you need to function as a supply chain manager in this new disposition we find ourselves. I hope that makes sense, sort of.
Awesome. So this is a question we have been asked numerous times by the CEO searching for the right person to lead a supply chain strategy. So what exactly the critical skill for supply chain leaders, Adebayo?
Okay. So, and there's a reason why, when you asked me to kind of describe the way dynamic leadership earlier, this is kind of a follow-on question to it. As I said earlier, dynamic leadership is nothing new. It's just a combination of all of that form of leadership and making sure that it works through the use of communication. Now, some of the skills that is needed, there's a reason why I asked, is pre-COVID or post-COVID? Post-COVID has given us a new light. Everyone and their mom seems to know something about supply chain now. So everybody in the world believes that they're supply chain managers because they can sell masks or they can sell PPE. Yeah. So now we're in a different world. At the same time, media has shined so much light on supply chain. Every news you turn into is talking one or two things related to supply chain. So it's important that supply chain managers post-COVID has to be very cognizant of that. So ability to communicate, and more importantly, ability to understand risk management. It is one of the most critical skills that's going to be needed for supply chain managers going forward. Because now we are no more supply chain managers, so to say, we are value managers. We are like the value managers for organization, because as time goes on, supply chain managers has been tasked with so many responsibilities. And one of the things that's going to be quite distinctive as we go forward in post-COVID is the ability to provide value in such a way that is so uncommon. Because right now, I mean, the recession has been predicted to befall a lot of organizations. Now, how can you, within these conditions, how can you provide value? So ability to understand risk. And if you can actually tackle the issue of risk within your organization, you are in it kind of in a way, showing value and making sure that you're providing value for organization. So risk management, communication, and one last thing I will ask to is supply chain managers to understand the geopolitical landscape. We are we are operating in quite an interesting times. The issue of globalization as we know it, a lot of us grew up under the globalization concept in doing trade, movement of goods and services across international borders. All these things is under attack from populism and nationalist behaviors. Good or bad, they all have their pros and cons. Because of this friction between these two ideologies, it's changing the way business is done, it's changing the way we fight wars, it's changing a lot of economic policy, trade policy. And when that happens, is kind of elongating supply chains, shortening supply chains, it affect the way we template and we strategize. And with that happening, we have to be very sensitive of that. Because despite all this geopolitical landscape, tug of war, our client and customers alike should not feel the heat of the outcome of this tug of war. And that is why I employ supply chain managers post-COVID to actually bag these three skills, improve their communication, understand risk management, supply chain risk management, most importantly, and also understand the geopolitical landscape. These skills are not something you're going to find on the chart or some of the skills, some of these body of knowledge or supply chain is pushing out. But I'm telling you, as the guy on the street, that I understand what is going on the street and I understand the way, supply chain is being postured for the next decade or so. And as we continue to battle all these different trading blocks, different trade wars, supply chain managers have to be strong and have to be grounded in those things. So communication, risk management, knowledge, and geopolitical skills.
Awesome. Interesting. Okay, so before we close our conversation today, do you have any final thoughts or any key takeaway that you would like to share with our listeners?
I want to employ supply chain managers out there as we continue to do. This COVID-19 has been very stressful, not only for the people at the front, the first responders, but also for supply chain managers as well, because they are being tasked on day-to-day basis to do the impossible, to perform miracles. And I want to kind of appreciate all of them and applaud them for all their effort in making sure that health workers and patients alike receive their PPE, especially in these trying times. As we go forward as well, our job is so integral and more functional than ever before. And I think people that are serious about business and understand what supply chain management does. And like someone put it for me, he said, doctors, save one life at a time, but supply chain managers save thousands of lives by decision. And I'll leave you with that. I mean, supply chain managers save thousands of lives by one decision at a time. So, and I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks again, Adebayo, and look forward to speaking to you at another time. See you and goodbye.
At Bichara Supply Chain, we are committed to driving global perspective to embrace technological adaptation in improving process efficiencies. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share Bichara Supply Chain. and stay tuned for the latest updates. To learn more, visit our website www.bicharasupplychain.com. Thank you for listening to us. We look forward to seeing you at our next episode.